Welcome back everyone to my channel. Today's video begins a comeback following a 2-year hiatus. I only made one video during the last 2 years, and that was part of a presentation for an online conference. And it's not that I lost interest in my YouTube channel, but with the craziness of 2020 and 2021 with COVID and then numerous controversies, I just felt like I needed to withdraw from the world a little bit more and just kind of temporarily lost interest in sharing much of anything online. But I also wanted to take some time to think about how to be more structured and focused in my videos and improve the quality of the content. When I first started my channel, I mostly threw ideas and topics at the wall to see what sticks, and just thought through what I wanted to say in my head and go unscripted. But that is all changing. Much more planning, thought, and editing will go into my videos. I will also end up having 2 channels. My main channel, this one, will be focused on travel, geography, nature, the outdoors, and then I will have a second channel that will cover topics ranging from music and movies to book reviews and even some current events. So, now on to today's video. The title being, "You are traveling overseas for only 2 to 3 weeks? Sounds like you lived there." What do I mean by this? Well, many people want to travel overseas and want to learn about and get to know a country or a region of the world, or maybe even a different state or region even in the US. And would ideally kind of like the idea of maybe living there for a bit of an extended period of time, for a few months, as opposed to just being a tourist. But they're just not in a position where they can do that. You know, they have an established career that they like. They have a home, family obligations to attend to, or something that keeps them where they are. So, and maybe you're in a position where you can easily take 2 to 3 weeks off, but you're just not in a position where you can take off for several months. So in this video, I'm going to give some tips and suggestions based on my experience on how to make a 2 to 3 week international travel experience really count and have a deeper and richer experience during that time. That can seem like you've visited for much, much longer. So if you want to know how to really get to know a country and region and milk the time that you have there to its most optimal degree, much more intimately, then this is the video for you. Like I mentioned before, this can also apply to traveling within the US as well. Now, for the record, I have not lived overseas or been overseas for a longer period of time than 3 weeks at a time. And so I'm not in any way suggesting that you could possibly know a country in 2 to 3 weeks than someone that has lived there for a year, okay? I'm in no way suggesting that. I also want to say that this is also not for everyone. One has to be most effective and successful in really optimizing 2 to 3 weeks. One has to be very observant. They have to have a good sense of direction of traveling by foot or transit. So, and of course, they have to have a sharp memory of what they saw, the conversations that they got into with locals, and really spend some real time researching what they want to do, what they want to see, how to get there, how to get from point A to point B to point C. You know, some people keep business very separate from pleasure and want to just relax if they're traveling. Nothing wrong with that. But yeah, for many people, travel means a vacation and would rather let others take care of everything, and that's fine. So because of that, when people hear that you traveled for 2 to 3 weeks, and they think, well, what could you possibly do during that time? Well, again, it just depends on how you go about doing it. So personally, I love doing my own research on traveling. I feel a very sense of achievement and satisfaction. You know, I stay up till midnight or to 2 a.m. perusing travel discussion forums and weighing different options, researching public transit options, determining travel time between cities or even walking distance within cities, researching UNESCO World Heritage sites and anything like that. Most people aren't quite like this. Most people are not particularly prone to paying attention to the details of their surrounding wherever they go, and maybe they don't remember the details of conversations they've had with the people they've encountered. So some people also get very lost very easily. They don't have much of a sense of direction. And some people, can barely remember the names of the towns and cities they visited, much less the historic sites they saw. So this not for everybody. So here are some of my tips and suggestions. Number 1, take part in some kind of experience where you get truly immersed in the local culture. I have 3 examples here of something that you might want to think about and do some research on. Number 1, consider doing a homestay where there are opportunities to arrange for lodging in local households if you know where to look. Usually this is arranged oftentimes through some kind of educational institution. When I was in high school and our high school band and orchestra went to Europe back in the late 90s, they arranged that. It was certainly cheaper and it gave a more full cultural experience to live with a family or household. I did this again more recently in 2019 when I traveled to Chile and I took Spanish lessons for a week in the evenings, and they arranged for a local homestay in Santiago, Chile. And that brings us to the next point. Find an opportunity to learn some lessons in the local language. This could be taking a whole semester or a couple semesters of a particular language before you travel to that country. Or there's also crash courses. Obviously, we have a lot more resources now than we used to. But don't just rely on Google Translate, because you really learn a lot more when you learn at least some of the basics of the language. I took Spanish for 3 years back in middle school. I occasionally will do some very basic small talk, with people I know in California here that speak Spanish. But for the most part, in Chile they have a different dialect, different words, and so I felt it was a good way to spend my evenings, to take some private lessons at a local school that was geared toward tourists and foreigners. So yeah, you can find English speakers all over the world, and yes, we have Google Translate in so many different. We live in a globalized world, but I'm a bit old school. I think that you should only use technology to make you smarter, not to make you not have to do work, or at least in this way. Putting forth the effort to learn some basics of the language can often, though not always, make a positive impressions on the locals of any country that you're traveling to. And number 3, or letter 3, take part in some kind of local volunteering experience. Paid work overseas involves a very complex visa process. You may not be qualified for it, and again, if you're only going for a short time, that's maybe not really an option. However, volunteer experience, in addition to the positive impact you might have from the actual volunteering, it is, depending on what it is, it gives you a little sense of what it's like to do work. You're achieving some goal in the locals or in a local community, and you interact with people in a way that is not typical of tourists, but a little bit more kind of a day-to-day thing, and so you get that kind of experience. In Australia, I volunteered for a conservation organization where I planted trees on a nature preserve outside the city of Newcastle, New South Wales. And the project managers I volunteered under did have extensive knowledge of wildlife and ecosystem conservation in Australia, so they were a little bit like my own personal Steve Irwins, the crocodile hunter. Number 2, do your own research. Put together your own itinerary. Doing your own research and booking your own accommodations can give you a lot of self-satisfaction. It does take a little bit of work. Go onto Google Maps. You can often see the prices of accommodations, and then you can do directions to see how far it takes to walk from the train station or the bus station to that location. And of course, you can look at the reviews and so forth and determine what's within your budget or where your budget meets your expectations and so on and so forth. You don't necessarily have to travel solo, but maybe traveling with a friend is great. But when you're not traveling with a tour group, doing this work means that you have to look at all these different options, and you have to just kind of know about 5 to 10 times as much places, accommodations. You have to look at maps of the city online or on paper or what have you, however you choose to do it. But yeah. I don't mind staying up past midnight to do something. When I get on a roll to plan travel, it's like I almost feel like kind of a little bit of a high doing it. I would figure out the best route between 3 or 4 different historical sites, museums, famous restaurants, whatever. And like I said, you save a lot of money when you're doing that yourself as well. Now, this does not mean that you shouldn't avail yourself to guided tours. You absolutely should, and that also is a way to have a little bit more social interaction with locals as well as other travelers, and you can hear about their exchange different experiences. The guides can answer all kinds of questions. Easy transport, obviously they can show you hidden spots that are maybe a little off the beaten path. But those are day trips, and those are still something you have to do research and then book yourself, and arrange that, and figure out what the meeting point is or how to get there and all that kind of thing. And there's a lot of companies. There are some like larger middlemen companies that I've had some good experience a couple times I've done that, like Viator, Viator. Maybe there's some bit of mixed reviews, but I certainly had no issue. But they are kind of the middleman that connects with tour companies. So that might be something to check out if you're just looking to individually book any day tours of whatever. Like this summer, when I'm going to Italy, I'm doing a tour from Naples to go to see Pompeii and Vesuvius. So anyway, so that is number 3. Okay, so again, number 1 was find some cultural experience immersing yourself in local culture, whether that's homestays, whether that's volunteering, taking some kind of class, maybe the local language or whatever it might be. Number 2, doing your own research on accommodations, getting from point A to point B, and what are some of the better spots and sites to see. Like I said, I actually really recommend, wherever you're traveling. This is not the be-all and end-all, obviously, but if you're really kind of thinking like, what are some of the top sites of a country to see, look at the list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Yeah, that's not the be-all and end-all, certainly by no means, but that's a good starting point. Number 4, divide your time between urban and rural. I think that, and the big cities like the capital city as well as the small towns and small cities. All that really provides real balance, and when you split your time like that, it really gives you a much more fuller experience and gives you the broad spectrum of life in that country and so forth. So yeah, spending both time in the capital city, small towns, and depending on if you're interested in nature and the outdoors, which of course I am, to visit national parks or some other kind of protected wilderness area. Now, when I traveled to the UK in 2017, I spent 4 whole days in London. I got a 3-day Brit Rail pass that allowed me to kind of jump the queues, and I really use it to my fullest advantage. Those kinds of passes, though, some people think that they may not be worth it, but if your goal is to comfortably do and see as much as possible without maybe exhausting yourself, I mean, there absolutely is a point where you pack in too much. But the point is, though, that they can be worth it, especially if you're traveling solo and you don't need to necessarily look to your friends or family that you're traveling with. What do you want to do? So that's something to keep in mind. And then I had an 8-day Brit Rail pass, which was great. Now, the UK being a compact country, where a train ride between any 2 cities of interest for me were no more than 2 hours apart by train, I could hop on a train around 5 or 6, and kind of after a lot of the sites are closed, and then get on the train and then be at my destination by 7 or 8, check into my hostel or Airbnb, and then go hit up a restaurant or pub or what have you. Now, this is a little bit more opinion and personal preference, but again, how much time to set aside for the spectrum from central big city to wilderness area and everything in between is going to be a little bit different depending on where you are. Personally, I think in Europe, if I'm traveling in Europe for 2 weeks somewhere, either just in one country or a few countries, I tend to spend a little bit more time in the cities and towns, both small towns and bigger cities, because it's the history, the art, the architecture, the regional cuisine, etc., the compact, narrow streets and things like that is the bigger focus, though I do certainly spend some time in nature and the outdoors as well. But, despite the fact that Europe has plenty of stunning natural beauty, With some notable exceptions, there's not a whole lot of scenic spots just in terms of the nature that don't have a rough equivalent here in the US that I can visit. Now again, there's a lot of exceptions to that. Certainly the landscapes of the Celtic world of Ireland, Scotland, and Wales have no comparison in North America with the green moorlands and the sea cliffs. And so there's certainly a lot of exceptions, but generally, typically in Europe, the landscape is more tame. Typical nature are woodland parks that were formerly royal hunting grounds in the States, and hiking, oftentimes, like in Italy, involves hiking between villages. So therefore, it tends to be a little more focused on the culture and history. When I was traveling in the UK for 2 weeks, my time in nature was, I definitely did some hiking in North Wales, in and around Snowdonia. I walked around some of the fields and pastures around Stonehenge, near Salisbury, and walking through the woods of the Windsor Great Park. And that's pretty mostly it. But with continents like Australia or South America, an excursion into the famous remote landscapes that are and vast areas that are kind of at the ends of the earth, that's an experience that I really prioritize when I visit those places. Like when I went to Argentina, loved Buenos Aires, but I really want to see Patagonia. And so I spent basically, this was also when I went to Chile. I spent most of my time in Chile, but I went to Argentina, spent a day in Buenos Aires. I did get a chance to go see a tango show, dinner and tango show, as well as walk all around the Plaza de Mayo. But I spent 4 days, 4 full days in Patagonia, in El Calafate to see the Perito Moreno Glacier and the various trails that leave the village of El Chaltén. Because that remoteness of Patagonia really was a priority. As well as, the same thing can apply to countries that, like Brazil, that, contain part of the Amazon. And also places like Australia's outback. I love Sydney. It's one of the most beautiful cities, I think, in terms of the natural setting with beaches and harbors. However, the outback, the Australian outback, is not a place I got a chance to go to last time. In 2015. I'd like to go back to visit Australia and do some kind of experience that includes a few days of camping and jeep excursions somewhere in Western Australia, and see some of the national parks there. So anyways, I haven't traveled to Asia or Africa yet, so I don't have too much to say about that. So I'm not going to talk about places that I haven't been to, but I certainly have ideas of what I do my first time to those continents. But anyways, finally, last tip and suggestion. If you have friends from all over the world, then you have such a great resource there. They can tell you all kinds of things about what life is like, what the culture is like. So obviously, talk to them, listen to them. That can always make you better prepared and kind of hit the ground running when you get to those countries. So those are some of the tips I recommend to have an experience that is beyond a typical tourist experience, and how to milk the 2 to 3 weeks as much as possible for a more authentic experience. Do you agree with my recommendations? Did you find them helpful or something to think about? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this sort of content and want to see more of it, please like the video, hit subscribe, and share with your friends who also might be interested. So with that, signing off now, and I will see you next time. My next video is going to be a compilation of a 2-week trip I did up and down the East Coast from Massachusetts to Virginia. So look forward to that, and I'll probably be posting that most likely a week from now. Thanks, have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.